In today's episode, we're going to be discussing what to do when you're narcissistically abusive and ex tries to come back. And today's self-help tip will be why you should be careful with following popular self-help advice.
Thank you for joining us on Breaking Free from Narcissistic Abuse, where we talk about strategies, tips, and tricks on navigating and recovering from narcissistic abuse. I'm your host, Dr. Kerry McAvoy, a mental health clinician with over 20 years experience and author of Love You More, a graphic inside look at my experience of a toxic relationship.
And I'm your other co-host, Tara Blair-Ball, a certified relationship coach, an abuse survivor, and author of Reclaim and Recover, Heal from Toxic Relationships with a 7-step guided journal.
We're thrilled that you're here with us today. Remember to subscribe so you don't miss future episodes, and leave us a review and let us know what you think of the show. You can find me at Instagram at Kerry McAvoy, PhD.
And I'm at Tara.relationshipcoach.
I heard this week from someone who asked me whether or not they should be in contact with someone that they separated from who is narcissistically abusive. And she said that he changed and he seemed really good and that she had really good boundaries in place. And so she felt comfortable about doing it, but wanted to know my opinion. So what do you think, Tara?
Okay. So in a lot of research, it takes 6 months to a year of active change with someone usually holding you accountable, like a therapist or coach of that. So 6 months to a year of you meeting with somebody once a week, every other week, for really change to be implemented. And at least 6 months, definitely, for it to be meaningful and lasting change. Okay. So if it had not been 6 months to a year, at least, I would assume that this person really hasn't changed in a way that will stick. And in other research, they say people as a whole can only change about 15%. So yeah, which I think is helpful to recognize, is that if we're in a relationship where we want our partner to change 50% or 100%, that's not necessarily possible. What do you think, Kerry?
Yeah, in fact, I heard Sandra Brown say in a podcast, this is her phrase, can you change blue eyes to brown? Because some of the things that we're talking about, let's even back up and talk about why narcissistic abuse happens. And we said last week that it felt like a con for you and I, and maybe for a lot of people, it feels like a setup and a con. There's personality hardwiring that's essentially different that's going on. We're talking about somebody who's showing a propensity to exploitation, to disregard you as a person, and to not be empathic about the way that their behavior is affecting you. Those are really big things, very serious things, personality qualities that aren't very amenable to change. So here you are saying you need to take 6 months to a year to change. I doubt that amount of time had passed. And then you're telling me on top of it, I always wondered what degree. I love that statistic, 15%. I knew it was slight. I knew it wasn't a lot, but I didn't know the number was roughly 15. So 15%. Let's think of that. That's not even a quarter. That's not even a quarter of a turn. I mean, it's just like an adjustment. That's all we're talking about, an adjustment. Wow. Yeah. So it's common though. This happens a lot. And yeah, so why do you think people do it? Why would somebody who's basically shit on you come back and want a relationship with you?
Loneliness. I think that's often, and when we're talking about narcissists in general, like their other supplies may have dried up, like where they're struggling to find new supplies. And they're like, well, this old supply was like, okay. So I guess I'll check in with them. I also find myself personally, as well as with my clients, is that it always seems like when we get better or healthier and start learning how to assert boundaries, it's like these people come back to test them. They're like, how good really are your boundaries? Like, are you going to let me back in? Because if I come back in, I'm coming back and I'm bulldozing it, because I've done that. A lot of us have probably done it. We've let those people back in and the same patterns started to arise slowly. And it's always like the frog in the boiling water, it always seems like radically different, but then it starts to feel really much the same as what it was. But they've already gotten behind our defenses. And I don't know if it's a test but it seems to always happen that they just like, you're getting your life together, you're moving on, you're seeming happy. And they're like, let me come back. And I mean, we've called it before with narcissistic abuse of hoovering.
Yeah.
You look great. They want to come and suck it up.
Yeah. Yeah. I think there's a lot of reasons. I think there's a lot of reasons why. One is that I think, just like you said, that they don't see people as human. They see them as objects. They're like, I imagine them like a car collector. And they got and each relationship is a different car. So they have this big warehouse and they have the Jaguar, and then there's a Mercedes, and then the BMW, and maybe even the car they had from their teenage years. And sometimes they want to go over and just remember what it was like to drive that thing around. They just want to test drive you. So they're coming back just to sort of reminisce. And I do agree. I think sometimes they do that because what if the car number one breaks? The new one, the special one, isn't up to par. Maybe it's getting its tires rotated or something. It needs to rotate you in because God forbid they don't get whatever they need to do. But here's the one that I often tell people that I see when they hear it, a light bulb comes on that I think is really pivotal. These individuals, like I said, are missing something in their personality, the hardwiring. So what they do is they actually use people as like ego scaffolding. So maybe, for example, they really don't know how to bring purpose and joy into their lives, and so they will augment and use yours to do that. Or maybe they really lack the wherewithal to set goals and to get forward, and you've been successful, and they'll utilize you for that. Or maybe they can't shore their shakiness up, and they feel really shitty about themselves, and so they'll utilize your admiration for that. So they can't manage their own needs and weaknesses inherently, so they use us as a way to strengthen and they stabilize themselves. And so it's whenever they feel shaky, they'll lean back into these relationships. But I so agree that here's the thing I didn't know. I mean, because come on. I mean, if you and I had a blowout, I would hope that we could come back and fix it and go forward and that we be better for it. That's how things are supposed to work.
Yeah.
They use that though. They use that belief against us. But they don't see it as, oh, going forward, I'm going to be careful about XYZ. They see it as, oh, they've taken me back. So that means everything I've ever done before now no longer counts. This is as if we've washed it under the rug and we can move forward. And now, and it gets worse. I no longer respect you for taking me
Right.
back. So I'm going to really dish it out to you the next time.
Mhm.
I was shocked. When that happened to me, I was shocked. I couldn't believe it because I really was under the first assumption that when people say I'm different and we're going to be different and I'm going to fix things, I thought I thought he meant it. I thought he meant it.
Yeah. What I've seen a lot with my work with couples is once that boundary of seeing once that boundary of not having empathy or respect gets crossed, it is really hard to bring it back.
Mm.
And that's something too. And you mentioned like dehumanizing or objectifying. Like if this is like a car, if this person's like a car to you, how much work, intense work would it take for you to no longer see that car as just a car? See it as a human with feelings that you can relate to and empathize with. I mean, I'm talking like, I mean, you've probably worked with narcissists, like much intense work, you know?
You make a
And
really powerful point. I mean, my mind's reeling, frankly. I've never seen it from, no, I know the objectify. We use that word all the time, but wow, you're right. So if I view you no more significant than my iPhone or my car, how will I ever humanize an iPhone or a car? I won't. And I can't, that to me, that's a leap I can't get over because it means that I would literally be moving from a flat worldview to a round worldview. The paradigm shift that I'm not for sure most people can make.
right.
Ah,
And if you're the iPhone, you're just going to spend the whole time like you did in the first relationship demanding to be seen as a human. And that person's just going to see you as an iPhone that's talking to them. They're
wow.
just going to ignore you like Siri.
Yeah. or talk to you when you don't want them to. Um, seriously, Tara, my mind is really blown. That is such a huge point that you just made. Huge, huge. So, what should we say to people when they have these partners come back? And especially, here's the tough part. We're not just talking about two people who happen to have a relationship for a period of time and it's just them, affects no one else. We're often talking about families with kids who are missing that other parent who want them home too. So, yeah, it's gut wrenching. That's the part that I guess about all of this that hits me so hard is the devastation and the brokenness that is the result of this. So I get why people are really tempted to hear these pleas and want them back. Yeah.
Yeah. So I'm divorced from my ex-husband and we still co-parent together. And I really hold on to every single day the fact that what's best for my children is that I'm in a healthy, loving relationship with myself and all the people in my life because I want to be a better relationship role model for them than I had or what I had when I was with their father. Like, there's such a focus on two-parent families. There's such a focus on that. But if it's a two-parent family that's super up, it will up your kids. And that's true of my parents' marriage. They've been together literally 40 years, and they're the most awful married couple I've ever seen. And I didn't want that for my kids. I didn't want my kids to see marriage or long-term romantic relationships as prisons where someone's the bonder and someone's the, you know, the captor or the captive. I didn't want my kids to grow up with that kind of stuff. And so these pleas of let's make the family, yeah, they're super emotional and super powerful. But it all comes back to could you have a healthy relationship with someone who views you as an iPhone? And would you want your children to be with somebody who would view them as an iPhone? That's
Yeah.
something that's something I feel really intensely about, that I really want my kids to have a better chance at relationships than I ever had. And I refuse to not model appropriate relationship behaviors.
I already know where the argument's gonna go, though. The argument's gonna go, but at least I'm around when this person's around my children. And if I'm not in this relationship with this individual and they're spending time alone, I can't control what's happening and it terrifies me. I get that. I get that. And you're right. I mean, they're right. They're right for saying that. There is periods of time when you're not going to have control over what happens. But I concur with you so wholeheartedly, Tara. I think having one healthy parent is better than having everybody. Because here's the other thing: when you're in a toxic relationship and the whole mode is unsafe, your children's focus is going to be just keeping themselves as manageable, safe as possible. They're going to be preoccupied with what's happening in the house. They're not going to be focusing on learning to play, learning the new things they should be learning at school, enjoying friends. They're going to be stressing about what's happening at home. And when they're at school and anything triggers them, they're going to be numbing out and missing. In fact, I remember back in second grade, there was a section of math. I don't know what was happening, but I was an excellent student, straight A student. I failed the section of math. Something must have triggered me and I checked out and I missed the instructions and then I couldn't get it back because that day of class was gone and now I'm supposed to like build on this. So I think often we forget that kids don't have the same kind of ego strengths that we have, and they can't manage the life the way that we manage. And they are hopeless. They're taking the cues of what's happening in the home. So having that quiet period with a healthy parent goes so far. It's so helpful.
Yeah. And you make a good point about being scared of the other parent with your kids. It's a fear that I've definitely faced and have to face, because I can't watch and control everything. But honestly, if I was still with my ex-husband, that would still be the case. I still would be scared about him being alone with them. And I'd have to be fearful of a lot other things if I stayed in that relationship too. I'd have to be fearful of my own physical safety if I stayed in that relationship. How insane I felt because the cognitive dissonance, like I literally couldn't do basic math while I was in that relationship because my brain was working so hard to make that relationship make sense.
Yeah.
So there's just, there are just certain things that we have to weigh, and uh, definitely taking us, and we'll talk more about this in a future episode about co-parenting with a unhealthy ex, but um, there's a lot to be said about being the one healthy person that can be there for your children, because that makes a world of difference.
Now, this person said, I've set good boundaries up and he's holding them for the most part. I caught the most part.
Mhm.
I know, I know. So as we wrap up on this one, let's talk about what does a good boundary look like and how do you know that you're actually holding a boundary? Because I know that's huge. I don't want to get into the big topic of it, but because here's the thing I found toxic people will not push a boundary by a blatant error, by a blatant disregard. They will test the boundary by putting a tiny toe over it. So one of the examples I often like to say is if you said to somebody, please don't call me during the work hours except for lunch or when I'm on my way home, they will call you at 1:05, 5 minutes after your lunch hour ends. Not 3 o'clock in the middle of the afternoon and not 10 o'clock in the middle of your morning. No, it will be the 5 minutes that will make you feel mean for not taking that call. But once you do it, poof, you've opened up the floodgates for more abuse.
Yeah. So it's funny you mentioned the thing about the phone, because when I started dating, that was advice I was given: set a small boundary and see how someone reacts to it. And for the most part, people were really respectful of my big boundary is I don't accept calls or texts after 10 o'clock at night because I'm asleep. And my my big thing, for the majority, people were very respectful and just honored it. It wasn't a big deal. But then I'd have the very big bulls who were like, oh yeah, they're calling you at 10, midnight, one, didn't matter. They were just like completely brash. And then you're right, they're the most subtle, insidious ones who like text or call at 10:01, that kind of thing, where it's just like they're putting a toe over, but they're not breaking it. You're the bad guy, you know? Boundaries. I think the most important thing to recognize with boundaries is they're not about the other person, they are about you. So a lot of times if a boundary is violated, or if someone is not upholding a boundary, we're the ones who have to put in the consequence. Someone doesn't get the pleasure of our company if they continue to yell at us, for example. They don't get to keep berating us, so I don't care so much about if your ex is upholding your boundaries. I care if he's not. What do you got to do? What does that look like? How do you enforce that consequence for yourself? Especially if he's not doing it all the time, because right now he's just, for him to follow through with the boundaries for the most part, sounds to me like he's playing nice, ticking some boxes. But then when he stops and you actually have to enforce, how good are you at that enforcing piece? Because I think a lot of us really struggle with enforcing, especially if we already feel like we've let someone back in.
Yeah, and here's the other piece, not only the enforcing piece, but do you wanna return to the person that person made you feel like?
The
Like,
iPhone.
yeah, not only that, but the fact that you say it's 10:01, have you called 10:01? Really? I mean, this you're gonna seriously, it's 1 minute do you really wanna return to being the meanie again? To
Right.
having to return to the place where you have to be the one vigilant and fighting and having all that conflict and all that crap assigned to you? That's so yeah, it's hard to enforce boundaries, but it also is what they do to how they make you feel as a person when you enforce the boundary. To me, asking myself that question, do I wanna return to that, is so enough of an answer to my I said, "Hell no. No way. No,
Yeah.
no way." So, yeah, I think we just sort of, unpacked a lot. Has enough time passed? Um, a are you in a different kind of space? Is this boundaries being able are you gonna be okay with holding boundaries? Do you like the way this person is gonna make you feel when there's a tough spot or conflict or a breach of some kind? Yeah, yeah. Interestingly enough, I didn't respond to this individual because I knew that they didn't want to really hear what I had to say. But my answer is no, no, don't do
Mhm.
this, no. But you know what, Tara? I hear this is so common. I bet you it's nearly 100% of the time this will happen to a narcissistic abuse victims. That the person will come back and swing in. Because mine did that. He asked, "Can't we be friends? I hope we can be friends."
Mhm.
I think it's so common. So we need to watch out for it and really guard ourselves against this.
I think a really good question that I broach to clients is be really intentional about asking what that person has done to change. Okay. Have they read a book? Have they met with a therapist? How many times have they met with a therapist? What books have they read? How long have they been in this process or journey? Because I think like 97% of the time, the person has done nothing. And they think that they can just tell you that they've changed and act a little different, which they're good at that, but they haven't really changed or been any different. And I think when you ask that question, really pay attention if they get defensive or if they're like, I didn't need that stuff. Because that's not someone that you can build a relationship with if they're gonna like squawk at doing it at this time.
Yeah. And I think another question to ask yourself is, have they done any real apology or amends
Mm,
work? Because chances are you're going to see it's a half-assed, throw something at the wall and see if it sticks kind of a effort to make up. Chances are because here's the thing, if I really, really ruined your life and hurt even our family, I would be so broken that I don't even know if I could come back to ask you again, honestly. And if I did, I would be groveling and doing all the work so that you would know I'm not the same person.
mm,
But you know what? That's not what most of us see. We see almost this entitlement like, well, they miss me, or I missed you, or we deserve this, or doesn't everybody deserve a second chance? You get some kind of a throwaway comment that does not in any way attend to the level of pain and betrayal that has occurred.
mm. Yeah, I talk about a lot the three parts of a good apology. First step is owning what we did and yes, apologizing for it. The second time or the second part, the first part is what we really did. Yeah, the first part is what we really did. The second part is owning it completely what we did. Like I acknowledge that it had this impact on you, etc. But the third part is changing the behavior. And that's what I see a lot is that a lot of people might get the first two, but they really don't get the third one. And we have to recognize is their behavior changed? And has it changed for a long time? Like I'm talking about 90 days or more is that behavior changed? Because these are ingrained behavior patterns, just like you've said.
And not just with you, but with everyone. You need to see them showing up at work different, showing up with their neighbors different. If they have kids from another marriage, showing up with those kids differently. It needs to be everywhere. It can't just be, oh, I've changed with you. Because to me, I'm not believing that. A
Right.
really changed person changes globally, changes everything.
Mhm.
Well, yeah. So, yeah, I know my answer on this one. It's a big, hard
No.
no, no, no. Run for the hills, girl. Run for the hills. So next week we're going to be talking about, oh, Tara, this is a big one. And financial abuse. How to handle when you're being abused in a relationship and you want to get out. What's the first steps to handling that? What can we do? What about it? How do you get a way out? So that will be on the docket for the next time.
Today's self help tip is be careful about popular relationship or self help advice. Too often, when I was in my very unhealthy, abusive, toxic relationships, I would look towards popular relationship advice, like practicing the love languages or Dr. John Gottman's theories about the seven principles of a successful marriage, thinking that if I applied those, it would fix the issues in my relationship. Unfortunately, my relationship lacked emotional safety, which means that there wasn't space to practice giving and receiving love or having trust or respect because that emotional safety was the foundation that our relationship was lacking because there was abuse in that relationship. So if you are experiencing abuse or any other kind of toxicity in your relationship, that's actually the place to start on and sort of ignore or avoid other self-help advice that doesn't directly address that.
Tara, that is so powerful because I know I did that. That's what I went, leaped out and read all that great help on good communication without realizing that I wasn't feeling safe. So this is really great advice. And I'd love to know what the audience thinks. What advice have you been taking that's working? maybe where have you been leaning into, and have you asked yourself, am I safe first? So I'd love to hear back from everybody and your thoughts on this tip.
What did you think of today's episode? And are you planning on trying the self-help tip? Either way, let us know by dropping us a comment or sending us an email. Are you following us on social media? We'd love to connect with you there. And we'll see you back here next Monday.